Still weird to be on this side of the fence. So good to do God's work, not by myself, along with all of you. There are some of my sons from St. Augustine here, which is great. Talking about fruits, I think I knew you before knowing you through Monsignor del Castillo. In 2016, I was assigned to St. Agatha, and he was covering for Father Somariba. He was on vacation, and Monsignor came for a month and a half there. And I spent that summer with Monsignor. I have learned so much from him. And I drove him around a lot. So I've been in the old property that he used to congregate, and I drove him here a couple of times. We had wonderful conversations, dinners. You know the tree by its fruits. I have learned so much from him. And I'll never forget, one day he's like, "Leo, keep it up, the good work, persevere." And he printed a picture that someone took it. That was before I left, a few days before. He placed under a flower pot, and "I'm praying for your vocation." And I still have that picture inside of my Bible. That's the good fruit of the tree. So I would never imagine that I would be here with you now. So after we leave you, I'll just send him a message. Here is where I just celebrated Mass, knowing the La Agrupación, but never being inside. So it's good to be here. So that's a good fruit. But today we heard the psalm talking about covenant. It's so important for us in the world today, especially as men, to have that word in mind, covenant. A covenant. And then we hear how the Lord made a covenant with Abraham. The Lord communicates through events. We only remember things because they become events in our lives. So if we hear how the Lord communicated with Abraham, back in the day, in antiquity, covenants were made like this. Let's say, John, and you are, sir? Goomer. John and Goomer. So let's say you entered in a covenant with John. Let's say John's son wanted to marry your daughter. So you would enter in the covenant, right? What would happen was exactly what happened here today in the first reading. They would get the animals, cut them in half, but one side, half side here, a half side here, and the two parties would walk between the corpses. And your garments would touch the blood. What happens in that type of covenant is that if one of you break the covenant, that's what's going to happen to you. If you break the covenant. What is beautiful here, but the two parties had to walk between the corpses. What is beautiful here is that the Lord puts Abraham to sleep. And then he walks through by himself. Meaning, I take full responsibility for this covenant, Abraham, not you. Jesus did the same thing. The covenant of the body and blood did not depend on the apostles. Can you imagine if God's covenant depended upon us? Where would it be now? It did not. Jesus took full responsibility for the covenant for us. What a great relief, right? So what I need is to cooperate with God's grace, to continue his covenant, the eternal covenant. And I mentioned events. Second person of the Holy Trinity wasn't Jesus yet. When the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, that was an event. And if you think about, if I ask you, John, or anyone here, tell me about yourself, you're going to tell me a sequence of events that happened in your life. When something's memorable, that means that you remember them. Memory, it's not the capacity to remember what I did yesterday or the capacity to retain data. It's not this for the Jewish people. It's the capacity to make things actual. So what Jesus did with the covenant, in a few moments from now, this is the covenant, the eternal covenant of my blood. Do this in memory of me. Memory, to make things actual. Now, present in the eternal present. And the Lord is telling each and every one of us today, do not worry too much. The covenant depends on me. And that's why the Lord left the sacraments to us. That's why the Lord asked some of the men that were sitting on that side to come to this side and be priests to continue that eternal covenant, that sequence of events in our lives. And that's why the Lord chose the majority of you to get married, have wife and kids, to continue that covenant, because you are created by Him. But the beauty of that is that I am not fully responsible for the covenant. God is. He took that responsibility. What we need to do is to continue to do what He asks of us, to be children of God, knowing that He will take care of us. And as a priest, it's so good to hear that. Like, yeah, the covenant of God, Jesus' covenant, does not depend upon me. I'm just an instrument, as you are. And I believe that the little I know from La Agrupación Católica, it's a solid group seeking the Lord with a heart full of fire. And the experience I had already with some of you, I know David for a few years, John, remind me your name again. Carlos, met him at St. Louis. And also some of you that I already saw at St. Augustine. So it's good to be here, and let us always remember that the Lord takes responsibility for His covenant, God and in Jesus. So let us remember that we are children of God, and we continue this series of events that will lead us and others to heaven.